In this video, I want to show you how within the As You Learn Gradebook, if you are a percentage grader, you'll want to use weighted mean of grades as your aggregation. And by percentage, what I mean is you want to assign specific weights, that exams are 25% of their grade, journals are 15% of their grade. If you want to assign percents, those are weights, and you want to use weighted mean. Once you're within As You Learn as the teacher, you should notice this block over here that says Quick Set. Students see Gradebook yes or no. By default, it's off, and what this determines is whether or not students have this overall grades link on the side that takes them to their individual gradebook. If you want them to see it or not, just make sure your preference is selected and then hit Update Settings. To access your Gradebook setup, go under the gear and go to Gradebook Setup. From here, you'll see on this top blue line, this is where you set your overall course aggregation. And here I can see it says simple weighted mean of grades. That's the default. If you're a percentage grader though, you're going to want to change that. So on the blue line, click Edit to Settings. Here, toggle from simple to weighted mean of grades. Weighted means you're going to enter the numbers and the values and the weights for individual items or for categories. Then just scroll to the bottom and hit Save Changes. You're going to get a recalculating message. Click Continue. As soon as you switch to weighted mean, now you have boxes, and this is where you determine the weights of things. So if I have an individual item worth 10%, I would just type the whole number 10. Can make each of these 5% of the overall grade. You might also have something where it's a category of items, and then you need to create a category. So in this example, I've created a category called journals, and that is a grouping tool. Categories group things together, and I say that group of journals, that's worth 25% of the overall grade. If you make any changes to these weights, make sure you scroll to the bottom and hit Save Changes, so that way it keeps whatever you enter. When you're on the setup page, here at the bottom, be aware that whenever you add a quiz or an assignment, those automatically appear within the As You Learn Gradebook. You don't need to do anything extra. But sometimes you do items within a classroom setting. They don't turn something in through As You Learn. So how do I create that column in the gradebook? On the setup page, and I know I'm in setup because it says setup here and here's gradebook setup. On the bottom of that page, there is Add Grade Item. So if I want to just create a column in the gradebook, I would click here. Type the name, enter the points, and then hit Save Changes. So I created something called Test, and it adds it to the bottom of the page. Now you may already have the items, but you do want to group them together. Then you want to do Add Category. It's a similar strategy. When you click Add Category, you would give it a name. And you'll notice when you add a category, there's also an aggregation here. Now, if you're a percentage grader, you want your overall, that edit on the blue line that we first did, to be weighted mean. But for a category, you may want to leave it on simple weighted mean. How simple weighted mean calculates is to add up scores, divide by points possible, and gives them a percentage. And that's a great way to determine what their quiz grades are. But you may want to do something different, so you can choose mean of grades, and that would average scores. The other aggregations, we have something called natural, and that's going to be a sum tool. But if you're a percentage grader, you're not likely to use that one. If you have questions about which aggregation to use, it would be best to follow up with your IT consultant. I'm going to recommend that for categories, you probably leave it on the default. But remember that within a category, it's going to add up points if something has more points, a 100-point item versus a 10-point item. That 100-point carries the weight, because with simple weighted mean, point value determines weight. Once you create a category, you have this option to exclude empty grades. I would recommend leaving that checked. What that does is If there are items in the class you haven't graded yet, you haven't gotten to them, it doesn't hurt their overall score. It says essentially your course total is a running total. This is how you're doing at this point, but we haven't done everything. When you create a category, you also have this ability to drop the lowest. And you could enter drop the lowest grade or drop the lowest 2 grades. One thing to be aware of, if you're going to use the drop the lowest, all the items need to have the same value. Once you've created your category, given it a name, pick the aggregation, just hit Save Changes. You're going to get the recalculating grades, hit Continue. It's going to add that category to the bottom, and here I can see the aggregation I picked for that category, and in this case that it dropped the lowest 2 scores. But right now there's nothing within that category. I didn't put any items in it. So if I wanted to move these 2 test items into that category, I can select those items by putting checks in the boxes, come down here to Move Selected Items To, choose that category, and click Continue. So now when I scroll down, here's that category. It's dropping the lowest 2. I only have 2 items, so this is a bad strategy. But you're going to want to leave this percentage on 100 because when you're a percentage grader, you're dealing with percents. Everything should be 100. But that's how you add items to a category. If you have an ungraded category, that can be a great place to store things that you don't want to contribute to the overall grade. So right now I have this test category weighted at 0%. So this category in no way influences the overall grade. But up here at the top where I've entered values, these are contributing to the overall student grade. I hope this helps.